while there, so that's pretty exciting. Now we have TNG Limited to talk about their Mount Peak project in the Northern Territory. In addition to being one of the few vanadium plays around, they have also been recognised by the granting of major project status by both the federal government and the Northern Territory government, so I think that's pretty significant. To tell us more, please welcome CFO Jonathan Fisher.
G'day, thanks Andrew, and thanks also to the team at Reed Corporate. It's good to be back here. Just to start, an apology actually from our MD. Many of you actually know Paul Burton, who has been a regular attendee at RRS for many years. Paul's actually got COVID. He attended an investor forum last week and came down with COVID, hence you've got me. So apologies for that, and I certainly hope that I don't get COVID out of this. I've managed to survive without it. But my background is, I've been with the company about 15 months, and I have a background in vanadium. I financed the last vanadium project that got up in Australia about 12 years ago, and I actually, even at that time, kept an eye on TNG. The project's been around a while, and thought this is the one to keep an eye on because of the technology I'll talk about in a sec, that the Taivan technology has the opportunity to fundamentally change the global cost curve for vanadium. And after keeping an eye on it for about 12 years, about last year I decided it's time to join and finance this project. Usual disclaimers. I'm going to start with the critical minerals sector. It's a sector that is getting a lot of attention at the moment from investors and from the government. Basically, the sector is involved in the energy transition through to a low-carbon economy. Both vanadium and titanium have been recognised by the federal government as critical minerals. Now, what does that mean? It means there is a lot of government support for the critical minerals sector, and it's something that the previous government got right in their support for that sector. And thankfully, our initial discussions with the new government, and you can understand this with the strong climate change agenda that was run by Labor, the Greens, and actually the Teal Independents, that level of support will continue. And so we certainly are pushing that message in Canberra to say that actually this is one thing the prior government got right, and let's keep it going. Vanadium itself is known as a green metal. I'm going to get onto that in a little bit. But basically 90% of its applications are recognised as green, and then there's another 10% which is strategic. So in terms of getting political will and political good capital, we've just got amazing tailwinds in the sector at the moment. And without making light of the situation in Ukraine at the moment, funnily enough, global geopolitical situation involving Russia is putting further tailwinds in this sector for vanadium because actually ex-China, Russia is the largest supplier of vanadium and actually titanium globally. So what do you get from TNG? You get exposure to some really good metals in a great sector, massive industry tailwinds. We have some technology called Taivan we'll talk about, which provides a competitive advantage over any other producer or developer in the world. We are going through the steps to finalise approvals. I know we've been around a while and it's taken some time. It's a big project, it's complicated, and we're getting there. And on the sort of the sexy end of the spectrum, in terms of vanadium redox batteries, you know, we can be a preeminent supplier of the highest grade of vanadium, which is required in the battery space. You know, it's funny, TNG was actually into ESG before it became cool. As I said, vanadium is all about the energy transition. In terms of where we've changed our ESG last year we have announced a consolidated mine site down at Mount Peak. Now, that's going to really help the S actually in ESG and social. We are massively increasing the amount of local job opportunities in remote Australia, and funnily enough, getting a lot of government support and encouragement to do that. Mount Peak, look, there's some numbers down the side. That was from Aisel Allen, who are economic advisors. That's required when you're doing large projects, have those kind of advisors on board. project is at advanced stage of engineering and approvals. I'm going to acknowledge that last year we had some issues through the NT approvals process. I'm very pleased to say that's actually all water under the bridge, and we've got a very good relationship going forward, and I'll talk a bit more about that. Andrew mentioned that we've been granted major project status. You asked what does that mean? Well, it means that I speak to the Chief Minister's office in the Northern Territory probably twice a week. Specifically the Major Projects Commissioner. They ask, how can we help? What do you need? Hey, I'm going to meet this person, these people are coming, why don't you come and tell your story? The level of support from the NT government is phenomenal. And in Canberra, similarly, the Critical Minerals Facilitation Office is a specific government body that was set up by the previous government. And similarly, the level of coordination through Canberra is fantastic. Getting these projects up is complicated, and so these kind of bodies really, they help grease the wheels. Now we are located, basically, if you put an X in the middle of Australia, basically at the juncture there, we are in the middle of Australia. Now some people think that's not the best place to be, but funnily enough, we're next to a rail line, that's next to a highway, next to an existing gas pipeline. There's a lot of flat land for a solar resource, and who would have thought it, and I'll talk about this a bit more in a second, there seems to be plenty of water as well. Obviously, water can be a concern in Central Australia. So from a location perspective, I'd say we're fairly well ideally situated. The resource, and actually I'm going to touch on this because there's been a bit of commentary on hot copper about it. The resource is slightly lower grade at a head grade than some of the other vanadium developers or want-to-be's in Australia. However, the con grade, where you look at the concentrate there, is almost identical. Now, funnily enough, in bulks, grade is king. In V, it's interesting because we can trade off a little bit of head grade for ease of mining, for low strip ratio, for size. And so actually the mining side of this project is low risk. It is an easy to mine ore body. And the critical thing being the concentrate, we're spot on. The crux of the project is Taivan. What does that mean? Look, we're hosted in what's called a vanadiferous titanomagnetite, so it's a magnetite project with elevated titanium and a little bit of vanadium in it. Our innovative Taivan process means we can get 3 high-quality revenue streams out of the one ore body. Most projects have to talk about byproduct credit because the other products are essentially an afterthought. Our process bakes in 3 completely separate products from day one. And that's actually important in vanadium to get revenue diversification. There is a lot of capital that you need to put to work, and having the 3 product streams significantly reduces financial risk. And you've even seen existing vanadium producers actually trying to retrofit their plants to be able to capture more of the secondary revenue streams. Much better to design it in from day one. So the Taivan technology, look, I'm not actually going to go into the technical aspects of the process flow. We call ourselves a Generation 3 process, so we maximise the value of the ore. Again, that means we do have the strongest ESG credentials because we maximise the value of those scarce natural resources. Other projects that have started as Gen 1 only capturing vanadium are about 20% of the value of the ore. They're trying to move to Gen 2 and capture some of that titanium and iron byproduct credit, but still cannot go to Gen 3 because actually separating titanium and iron, unless you've designed it from day one, is extremely difficult. Now, you can see the benefit of this. Traditionally, you get, roughly $200 of ore value out of a tonne, and we can get roughly $800, obviously subject to pricing assumptions. Now, here's some of the interesting stuff about the vanadium market. You look over on the right there at the globe, and you see the contribution of Russia and China together. So together, those 2 entities account for 76% of global supply. A little bit misleading though, because China also been about 50% of global production is also about 50% of global supply. So taking that out of the picture, Russia is 40% of non-Chinese supply. On the left, you'll see vanadium, look, fantastic price performance actually, and continued strong growth on the back of the steel and vanadium battery sectors. I do apologise for this slide, it's a bit wordy. I wrote it and haven't given it to the document production team to make it look good. So vanadium is green. Most uses of vanadium being steel actually has a green aspect to it. So vanadium is used, you put 1 kilo of vanadium into a tonne of steel, increase the strength of steel by 100%, and which means you use less steel, or you use less concrete in rebar reinforced construction, and obviously concrete is extremely carbon intensive. So in its vast majority uses, vanadium is green. I also call vanadium magic, and you can see those 4 colours there. Other than manganese, which does have 5 oxidation states, vanadium has most oxidation states of any transition metal, and they're pretty colours. Now, why is that important? Because that's how it supports the chemistry behind vanadium redox batteries. And when we look at the future growth in V, steel is a growth area, but the highest value growth comes from redox batteries because you need the highest grade of vanadium to go into a battery. Now, the other part besides steel and besides batteries is defence. Vanadium's earliest uses in defence were actually in tank armour. Again, a bit relevant when you're thinking about Russia and Ukraine. Not so much used in tank armour these days because there is a little brittling effect in terms of ballistic impacts. It's not so good. And it was replaceable by some other alloys. But it is completely 100% irreplaceable in titanium alloys in the aerospace sector. And they're actually quite high grades, up to 20% V in your titanium. And so thinking of any generation of fighter aircraft and actually ballistic missiles, vanadium cannot be substituted. It's a reason why the US actually keeps a stockpile of vanadium as classed as a strategic metal from the Cold War. And the US is a net importer of vanadium. They can't produce enough of it domestically. In the Cold War, they even used to buy some from Russia, as well as titanium. And so the current geopolitical situation causes a few strategic supply considerations because excluding China, you've got 40% of global production that sits in Russia. Now, there are no sanctions on vanadium production yet that I know of. However, when you think of ESG, and effectively this is the G, I don't think customers are going to be wanting to use vanadium that comes out of Russia in the medium term. And that means that developers in the Western world, in Australia, in the world's best mining jurisdiction, are certainly keenly sought after. V batteries. You'll see here on those charts that V batteries are exponential growth curve. They're great, and I'll talk about it in a sec. V batteries are absolutely hands down better than lithium for certain applications. So not for transport because the power to weight ratio is not as good, but for grid scale, renewable energy applications. So, for example, mating one of these with a wind turbine or a solar turbine to provide 24-hour baseload power. Vanadium batteries are the technology for that application. And when you think it took Tesla, I guess, really to make the lithium boom happen, vanadium is a little bit behind lithium in that, but you're starting to see significant tonnes go into batteries. Now, there are 2 things that are important in V battery applications. For performance, you need to maximise the concentration on a chemical basis, so moles per litre of vanadium in your electrolyte. And to do that, you need high quality V. If you have impurities in your V, your electrolyte can't be as high concentration, you get less power. The second is membranes, so that's a little thing that sits in the middle of the battery, separates the 2 chambers. The performance of the ion exchange capacity of your membranes is important. The first generation of V batteries actually had membranes that were not tailored to V batteries. They were using other industrial applications. The new tech coming out significantly improves the ion exchange capacity of the membranes. That means more power per litre of battery performance. So you'll start to see those coming through, and that power to weight ratio is never going to be as good as a lithium battery, but it is improving, and that means that the tanks required for the vanadium are lower. This is a nice chart from Vanatech, which is a Vanadium Global Industry Association, showing significant carbon reductions from lithium, actually. And the other thing it doesn't show, though, is also a key advantage over lithium is vanadium batteries can't catch fire. One of the issues with consumers on a residential scale for lithium batteries, the Tesla Powerwall, is they can kind of catch fire. Whereas these days you can get V batteries. They kind of look like two Rheem storage hot water systems next to each other with a little pump in the middle, and you can get those to power your home. Project development, look, we're due for a CapEx update by June, end of June. That's a few weeks. We are going through that at the moment. It has been finalised. We must acknowledge the industry pressures for capital escalation that are going on at the moment, and look, our project will be subject to those same pressures. We are working hard on value engineering, and it's possible that we'll have to do some more value engineering to make sure that that capital number is something that we're comfortable financing. In terms of project readiness, the other things to note, we do have an Indigenous land use agreement. We are in the process of updating that for our consolidated plant layout. That was delayed because of COVID, but now we're allowed back on country, and that is going well. The other thing is water. We were due a water update, which we finished the drilling for. As I said, seems to be lots of water. The hydros are still doing their thing. Sorry, I've got 30 seconds more. The financing, I did want to highlight what I said earlier. There is a lot of government money available for this sector, and that is going to continue, and we're very pleased with that. In terms of the project equity, the ESG-focused sustainable funds are a major project focus for us. So where to from here? We finalised that CapEx estimate. We value engineer a little bit, and we seek significant, we seek to take advantage of the industry tailwinds and the significant government funding opportunities, and we go and build it. So that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Jonathan. Now, if you'd all like to welcome Managing Director of DevEx, Brendan Bradley. Thanks, Brendan.
Thanks, Andrew. Thank you to Nick Reid and team at Resources Rising Stars for the opportunity to present DevEx Resources here today. Okay, this is our usual